Hey guys, Alex here. Many of you know that I ran a blog for many years that was directed towards creative businesses, creative professionals, people in the arts, people like artists and illustrators, photographers, filmmakers, that kind of folk. And one of the common complaints that would come up very often would be that despite putting all this work into the stuff that they love to do, whether it be paintings or creative expressive products, and the social media and marketing and all the other admin and stuff on the side, they were still not seeing traction, still not seeing much response in the real world, still not seeing enough people noticing their work and getting enough likes and followers, and ultimately, of course, selling enough and making enough money and seeing success in their creative businesses with all that hard work. So I wanted to break down that problem, see if we can get to the heart of it, and deliver, perhaps towards the end, the cold hard truth of the issue and what I think is the real truth around why many artists struggle, particularly in the modern world. So one of the problems is that there is a lot of people making art. You will notice this online through Instagram. We are becoming acutely aware of just the deluge, the sea, the cacophony of beautiful creative work made by talented people emerging from every nook and cranny around the world, creating amazing products. Now here's the issue about being an artist and trying to make a living with that craft. You are competing against one of the most enormous industries that there is, mainly because most people, or many people, a huge proportion of the world, whether it be a part-time thing, a side hustle, or their main project, is that they enjoy making art. People like to be creative and they like to express themselves, and many people try to make money from that. But of course, if you opt into the industry of becoming an artist in some form, a crafts person in some form, you are opting into an incredibly competitive industry, no matter which sliver of that art you have chosen to get involved with. So that's one of the main issues there. So what you need to do to survive in this industry is effectively work twice as hard as with most industries to get seen whatsoever, let alone create beautiful work in the first place. I mean, creating the portfolio of work is the first thing, but that's now a given. I mean, that's now, making quality art is a given. That is no longer the driving force behind why you would be successful necessarily in the modern world. Of course, you get people who come along who create something that's very novel, that's very fresh, that's very trendy, and they will get a lot of attention put on them. But for most people, you'll create a piece of art and you'll probably see multiple variations of that kind of thing done by many thousands of other people. So that's kind of a cold hard truth about the modern art system, is that there's just so much of it and you are up against a deluge of material that you're fighting against and fighting with to be able to be seen and to have people that notice you that want to buy your stuff. So that's the thing about art, is that there is a huge supply of art. There are a lot of people creating art and pushing all of that stuff into the economy, into the world that people are being deluged by. And then you look across to other industries and other professions and other services, there is going to be comparatively a lot smaller supply, just in sort of general terms, which means that there's going to be probably more demand for a lot of other things. It's going to be easier to find clients and customers for things that are in less supply, whether it be, therapists or plumbers or people who, fix your roof and that kind of thing. If you opt into a career that is in higher demand and in smaller supply, you're going to, through the laws of economics, do better in that industry. So with art, it's tricky because there are so many people who do what they love. They set out to create beautiful things, but of course, 1,000,001 extra person is competing with them in exactly the same field. So you have really taken on a big challenge. So understand that you are competing in something massive here. So you're going to have to do things that other people don't do if you plan on succeeding. Apart from the very one-off situations whereby you have artists that come along who very luckily stumbled on a very fresh style, or they might have put in lots of work to be deliberately very fresh and novel, and that's great. That's something that you might look into as well. But for most of us, it's a case of marketing harder. You have to market harder in a way that is not necessarily what you expect. So let me get to that in a second. So as I said, making the art and making really great quality stuff is now a given in order to be successful. You have to be good, because think about it, back in the day when Van Gogh was making art and Leonardo da Vinci was making art, there wasn't that many other people competing with them. So when they made something incredible, they got noticed. And obviously no one even noticed Van Gogh even back then. So it is tricky. But now you've got people in China who can reproduce the very highest quality art. So it's not about quality. It's about being perhaps in the right place at the right time, but more than anything else now, you need to market yourself in a way that is going to set you apart from the rest. So a lot of us find a lot of frustration because they seem to be doing what everyone else is doing, and they're doing what everyone has been told to do by all these online gurus, including myself back in the day probably. You know, getting on social media and tweeting a lot and sharing a lot on Instagram and blogging and making videos and showing people the work process and going to conferences and things like that. All these things that, you know, they're doing, they're either not doing it or they're doing it. And of course, people who are doing it are going to be even more frustrated because they're not seeing the result. And the reason is, again, because you are a tiny dot in a massive ocean of other artists who are all doing things that are what they love to do. And there's just so much supply of it because everyone wants to do the stuff they love. I hope you understand that. So if you're in this industry, you've got to commit to the idea of doing things in the marketing avenue that other people refuse to do, which means amping up your courage, amping up your vulnerability, and thinking creatively, thinking and acting uniquely and creatively to what everyone else is doing. So everyone else right now is churning stuff out on Instagram. They're looking at their pictures, they're seeing like 4 likes, and they're seeing some other guy with a million likes, getting depressed. That's a sort of endless loop. And I think it's still important to have a newsletter. I think it's still important to have a social media following. You know, you might as well use all those free resources. But in order to really ensure your success as an artist in an incredibly competitive world, you're going to have to do what others refuse to do. So what could those things be? What could things you do be that others refuse to do? For example, you've got to start going and approaching people in a very specific, targeted market. As an example, I mean, these are just creative ways that I'm coming up with solutions to these issues. You might want to need to start, you know, going in person to conferences and actually walking up to people, which most people don't want to do because they're too shy. But if you can overcome your insecurities and start approaching people within your target market who could very well, through your own research, be a good match for what you create, now you've got something there. Now you've thought ahead of the group. You're thinking outside of the box. You're thinking outside of the crowd. Think of other ways that you could do things that are outside of the crowd that others don't want to do. Most of these things, I'm afraid to say, but also disguised as a very good thing, are things that are going to require extra courage, extra confidence, and extra dealing with pain, suffering, shit, and fear. I'm sorry to say it, but if you want to be a successful artist and you're not one of those lucky few who sort of get noticed through the hand of divine, you know, Buddha, you're going to have to be extremely brave in getting your work out to what I would suggest is a smaller group of very pre-researched people that you have thought about. Okay, what kind of people are a good match for what I create? Okay, where are they going to be hanging out? What kinds of things do I need to say to them, or what kinds of things do I need to bring them in terms of value, in terms of giving, in terms of conversation, in terms of things that make them say, oh, this is an interesting artist, this is different. Where are they going to hang out, and how can I pluck up the bloody courage to go out and talk to these people? You're going to have to do that kind of thing. And it doesn't have to be in person. You can email people over and over and over again. I know this sounds spammy, but these are things that people don't do, so do it. Over and over again, follow up emails until they respond, and then try and get on the phone with them. You're going to have to get creative and vulnerable and brave in getting noticed these days. Otherwise, I'm sorry to break it to you, but you're going to have to work either extremely, extremely hard through the well-accepted mid-level forms of marketing that most other people mill around on, like social media and newsletter things, newsletter list building. All those things are kind of like low grade, low risk, and low penetration. You're not going to be noticed that well by just constantly building up your newsletter. But of course, those things are important because it's a tool that can work, and 1 in every 2,000 people are going to buy your product on a newsletter list. You might as well use it. And it's a good way for your followers to keep in touch with what you do, of course. But to really get noticed and find that success you're looking for, do what others refuse to do, get creative, maybe come up with a list of things other than what I've told you today, and do what others just aren't courageous enough to do. Be that courageous person. Get over your insecurities, get over your shyness. If people have called you an introvert all your life, it doesn't mean that you should be hiding behind the screen all day, drawing and using that as an excuse not to get out in the world. You will probably fail if you're not willing to go out and talk to people. So find a way to make that work for you. Follow me here, because I'm going to be doing lots and lots of programs and courses and exercises and seminars and workshops around this problem of facing rejection and facing the feeling of being judged by other people, because these are the areas in which you, by diving into them, are going to set you apart, and you're going to find a way to succeed that way. This is something to talk about. I'll expand on this, as I always say in other videos. If you've got questions about this, do fire away. I'd love to hear from you guys. I want to see your feedback. I want to see your contrary ideas to what I've said. Maybe I've said something that sort of, prickles your spine a little bit, and you might want to sort of counteract what I've said. Whatever. I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. Do write down any comments, feedback, subscribe if you want to hear more about this kind of stuff and facing your fears and dealing with anxiety and all that stuff. This is all stuff that I had problems with, and I have to say that whenever I confronted the issues that scared me the most, this is where I saw the most success. This is where I saw the most happiness, the most sense of swelling pride and results. Don't do what everyone else is doing. Be the wolf, get yourself out there, and be brave.